Why, hello everybody, how are you doing this fine day? I hope you're enjoying your week. And I'm just gonna be honest, I could feel it down in the pits, the very deepest, darkest pit of my testicles, that this is gonna be a long as fuck video. So, I'm not gonna waste your time with a long intro. You get the gist. Ripoff versus original. Not all the ripoffs are actually ripoffs. They're generally just people who are based off of other people, okay? Don't get mad about it. Don't be a bitch. It's fine. Hope you enjoy the video. If you do, like, subscribe, comment, share, and join the membership. If you join the membership, I don't know, you'll get blown by Disney. Whatever fucking works for you. Let's get started. First up, we have Eve from Stellar Blade versus 2B from Nier Automata. Two sexy-ass robot bitches who come down to Earth to learn about the nature of humanity and what it means to be human. But don't cream your pants already, fellas. The video just started. You got a long way to go. You got a long way. Oh, God, I just started this shit. Okay, we can do it. Let's go. So with this particular matchup, I have to do things a little bit differently than what I normally do. Normally, I will go over the story of one of the characters and then talk a little bit about their stats, and then go over the next character and then kind of compare them by the end. The problem with doing that here is that these characters are so fucking similar in not only characterization, but also story and themes that it would literally just sound like me repeating myself twice. So it doesn't really make sense to do that. I mean, the differences between these two stories are actually pretty subtle. I mean, both characters come to Earth from space for the sole purpose of defeating a particular person so that they can save humanity. And then they both have their opinions and minds changed on what the meaning of humanity actually is. The main differences here is that in Nier Automata, she's fighting against machines, and humanity has already been wiped out, so she's kind of doing it for no reason anyway. And 2B's character starts off the story very much so a machine who slowly obtains a humanity, like that's the whole theme of the story, whereas Eve is actually fighting another biological creature. There are still humans around, and she's already pretty human when she gets to the planet. She doesn't have to discover her humanity like 2B does. Outside of that, their stories are basically the same. They're both super fucking solid games that you should absolutely play. I think you should play Nier Automata for the story, themes, and really cool mechanics, and I think you should play Stellar Blade for the amazing combat and dead ass. But yeah, an actual like true to form comparison is just pointless. Besides, I already made a whole fucking video about that. Go check it out if you're interested. So because they are so similar in terms of characters, we're just gonna go down both of them at the same time. We're gonna start talking about each individual stat and comparing those stats to each other instead of like going over their whole list of powers. Because spoiler alert, they got the same fucking powers. So first up, whatever it is you want to call it, attack potency, strength, whatever. How hard can they fucking hit people? Well, they're sexy robot bitches from space, so pretty hard. The difference here is really comparing them from the beginning of the game to the end of the game, because how these characters increase in power is very different. So 2B starts off the game with a bang, literally, like the very opening of the game, she's about to be killed by this giant robot city-sized bullshit thing, and in order to survive, she kills herself by setting off this suicide bomb in her chest that makes this massive explosion. It looks like it could blow up a fucking large town or a small mountain or some shit. It's a really, really big explosion. If you take this explosion into account, it is far beyond anything that Eve can do. The problem is that it's far beyond anything that 2B can do as well. This is literally the strongest thing that we ever see in the entire game, and it happens in the very opening. Outside of this explosion, 2B doesn't have anything close to this. All we really see her doing throughout the game is fighting robots and destroying those robots with like sword hits and gunfire, and that's it. That's literally it. She has nothing else other than destroying robots. So we know that she's capable of chopping through steel and iron and things like this, different types of metal, but that's it. That is as far as it goes. So what would that be, like high wall to like low small building? Her physicals really aren't that impressive. Now there is a system in the game called chips where basically she takes these little chips and she puts them inside of her body, and they can give her enhanced abilities or straight up new abilities that she didn't have before. This is very useful. There is a limit to how many chips she could put in and just how much she can increase her strength. She never really gets beyond that point that she's just chopping through robots easier than she was before. None of her upgrades throughout the entire game are high enough to actually put her in a new tier of power. It just increases her physical abilities a little bit and gives her a wider variety of abilities that she can pull from. Eve, on the other hand, is a little bit different. That shit's basically Dragon Ball Z. When she drops down to the Earth, I would say that she's probably very comparable to 2B, but as the story goes on, she gets massive increases in power to the point that she's basically the strongest being that exists on Earth. So in the story of Stellar Blade, Eve is just one of many other Eve robots called the Eve Defense Force. They all look the same and they act the same and they're just a bunch of fucking clones of each other. She's no stronger or weaker than any other Eve bot, but she does have the ability that when she comes across another dead Eve, she can take their core and absorb it into herself. When she does this, she gets all of the physical ability, skill, and knowledge that Eve had before it died. She does this to dozens upon dozens upon dozens of Eves. By the end of the game, she's the strongest Eve that exists by far. And this is before the end of the game where she becomes an Atiba herself, and she becomes so goddamn powerful that she single-handedly takes on the entire Eve Defense Force by herself, a literal army of people who she was once equivalent to at the beginning of the game, and she wipes them all out. They're not even capable of laying a hand on her. She one-shots all of them. Previously to her getting this form, anytime she would fight somebody else in the Eve Defense Force, it would basically be a boss fight. But afterwards, they might as well replace the weakest units in the game. So her power increases are significantly greater than that of 2B. And even before this massive strength increase, she was capable of destroying an entire space station just a couple hours before. So I don't think there's really any argument to be had here. 2B is not as physically strong as Eve. She's barely even a fraction of her strength. Having said that, 2B's chip system does give her a larger variety of abilities to use. Whether or not those abilities can actually overcome the extreme strength difference that these two characters have is another story. In terms of speed, the characters are about the same. Both characters are capable of dodging light at point blank, and both characters fight bosses that just straight up use light as a weapon, like consistently. Like every single attack they do is light based and they react to it. 2B arguably can temporarily turn into light. If you look at her dash ability, it kind of looks like she sort of phases and becomes light for a split second to move. I'm not going to go as far as to say that that's clearly what's happening here, because this could just be a visual representation telling us that she is moving light speed and not necessarily that she's turning into light, but it definitely looks like she's turning into light. Either way, I don't think it's going to change a whole lot because Eve can react to light, and 2B is never shown attacking people while being made of light, so it's not really going to help her that much. Point is, both characters should be able to react to one another and fight on par in terms of speed. Now, it is arguable that after Eve becomes an Atiba that she's actually considerably faster than light, given that before she became an Atiba, she was dodging light and doing all the same shit that 2B could, and then afterwards, she took on an entire army of Eves, all of which are capable of moving at light speed, and they weren't even able to touch her. So it is possible that she's faster, but that could also just be due to her skill and just physical ability being superior to theirs, not necessarily her speed being faster. Because in the game, they are capable of hitting her, it's just very difficult. Overall, I'm giving them both the same speed, with Eve possibly having a slight advantage here. And to be honest with you, those are really the only two important stats to go over for this particular fight. I mean, neither character really even has hacks for the most part. They're just super strong, super fast, super skilled robot bitches. Like, that's it. There are a couple of other small things that might give them the advantage, like the fact that 2B has that little droid that can fire constantly at her enemies even while she's in the middle of combat, and Eve doesn't actually have that. So for instance, if Eve and 2B were getting into a sword fight, Eve wouldn't be able to just focus on 2B because she would constantly have this little droid that's flying around her, shooting her as they're trying to fight. So it adds this sort of extra layer of difficulty for Eve that doesn't exist for 2B. Eve also has a droid like this, but the droid can't shoot independently from herself. It actually turns into a gun and then she can grab it and then shoot. It doesn't just cause passive damage to her enemy, she actually has to inflict that damage herself. So it's not going to be as useful. Having said that, given that Eve should be considerably more durable than 2B, that little fucking weak ass machine pistol thing that shoots out of the robot really shouldn't do all that much damage to her and shouldn't affect her for quite some time. Like, the fight will likely be over before that little droid is capable of putting her down. So who wins the fight? Can 2B, who has a larger variety of abilities, overcome the vastly physically superior Eve? I don't think so. I think you could argue that she could if she's shown to have a higher level of skill than Eve does, but she really doesn't. She's skilled, don't get me wrong, but in an actual fight that requires skill against any other skilled swordsman in the game, she loses at least once. I mean, she's beaten by Adam, she's beaten by 1A. I mean, she gets her ass kicked all the time. And for the fights that are really difficult that she can't overcome, she usually has other people come in and help her out in some way. If you compare that to someone like Eve, who fights far more skilled swordsmen throughout the course of her game, her whole story is about her being behind enemy lines with no one to help her, and she has to basically overcome all of this shit just by her sheer skill. And even the mechanics of the game themselves point at her being more skilled. There are things in Nier Automata, like perfect dodges, that do show some amount of skill that 2B has, but the actual mechanics of the combat in Stellar Blade are just so much more complex, with things like undodgeables and perfect parries and counterattacks and all sorts of other crazy shit. You have burst attack and just things that don't exist in Nier Automata because it just doesn't have as complex of a combat system. Due to the complexity of Stellar Blade, you kind of have to give her credit for doing all that shit that the combat system requires from you. This just generally shows a higher level of skill in your average fight. And again, there's really nothing that 2B has that compares to Eve literally fighting an entire army of people who should be around the same level as 2B. The best 2B can do in this fight is that after she's defeated, which is inevitable, she just uses the self-destruct thing and kills Eve that way. And even then, it's not really a victory. It's more like a petty draw. It just shows she's a sore loser, really. So next up, we have Dark Feld from Legend of the Dragoon versus Cloud Strife from the Final Fantasy series. As a young boy, Cloud wanted to join Shinra and become a soldier. Not like a regular soldier, but like a soldier with all caps. It's a particular branch within the Shinra military that's basically like top tier, genetically engineered super soldiers. Only the absolute best of the best soldiers could even qualify to get into it. And Cloud wants to. He doesn't. He fails. Basically, he tries to get in. He's not good enough. He's not accepted. And he just becomes a basic bitch infantryman. This is very disappointing, obviously, but he just goes with it. But eventually, opportunity arises when he's sent on a mission with two other soldiers. One first-class soldier, Zack Flair. First class is the highest category of soldier. And the all-time greatest soldier who ever lived, Sephiroth. Well, to skip a couple of details, the mission doesn't go exactly as planned. Sephiroth kind of goes a little mad and kicks the living shit out of Zack Flair, and then tries to kill Cloud. But then, Cloud reaches deep inside in the pit of his soul and comes up with the strength to overcome and somehow defeat fucking Sephiroth. Okay, where was this fucking skill before? Anyway, after this, because he's got a fucking hole in his chest, he passes out. And then he's experimented on by this mad doctor who works at Shinra for like 4 years before finally being able to escape with the help of Zack Flair. This leads to the death of Zack Flair and basically amnesia for Cloud. But it's not like normal amnesia. It's sort of amnesia, but he also gets a lot of the memories of Zack Flair and he kind of becomes like a fusion of two people. Like he's sort of Cloud and sort of remembers Cloud's memories. But he's also sort of Zack and sort of remembers Zack's memories, but he doesn't remember all of any of them. So he's like this weird amalgamation kind of both people. He's an amalgamation of both characters if both characters had a massive hangover. That makes sense? Yeah, that makes sense. Anyway, because of this weird amalgamation stuff, he acquires all the skills that Zack Flair had. And he believes that he used to be a soldier because, again, he has the memories of that. He then eventually becomes a merc and then an eco-terrorist, and the whole plot of the game kicks off where Sephiroth comes back and wants to blow up the entire planet with the use of black materia and become like this weird god being that's got like one wing and shit. It's like a whole thing. Final Fantasy VII actually does have a pretty complicated story. And also, you should all already fucking know this. We're talking about Cloud fucking Strife here. He's only the most recognizable video game character of all time, other than like Mario or Link. So the real question here is, how strong is this motherfucker? Well, I'm glad you asked. So let's check up with our good friends over at Versus Battle Wiki and find out what exactly it is they say, because obviously they're always correct. And he is, well, multiversal. Of course he's multiversal. Everybody's fucking multiversal. They just hand that shit out like candy corn on Halloween. Cloud is not fucking multiversal. That doesn't even make any goddamn sense. Why do they say he's multiversal? Because of all the shit that happened in Dissidia? Even if we were gonna go with that being canon, which it's not, once again, like the Castlevania shit, it's just a fun crossover game where they fuck with the timeline to get a bunch of different characters who should never meet each other into the same story at the same time, or it doesn't fit anywhere in any of their games' timelines. It conflicts with several storylines that happened in those games' timelines. The characters are considerably more powerful than they are in their own games. The characters do things and say things that they just would never do in their own games. You're not supposed to take this shit seriously. It's a crossover game. People need to stop taking crossover games like they're fucking factual. It's not a part of Cloud's story. But let's say for a second that it is, okay? Dissidia's canon. Why do they fucking have him at multiversal? Because Cloud fights against characters like Gilgamesh, who is shown to do multiversal-like shit by erasing timelines and destroying universes, and okay, whatever. Fine. Here's my issue with this. Cloud does not fight a single one of these beings one-on-one. The very way that Dissidia is structured has him fighting these people with like 10 or 15 other fucking protagonists from other Final Fantasy games. It is clear as fucking day that even in the Dissidia games, Cloud is not as strong as Gilgamesh. So why are you scaling him to that? Well, you see, because Gilgamesh was able to destroy a multiverse, and if you can destroy a multiverse, it means that you can't be hurt by anything anything but a multiverse. That's the stupidest fucking shit ever. So if I punch you in the face as hard as I fucking can, and then there's another guy who can't punch as hard as me and punches me in the face, does that mean that I can't feel it because I can only feel punches that are equal to or harder than mine? Is that how that works? Because I gotta tell you, I've been in a lot of fights and that's fucking news to me. You don't have to punch someone that hard to hurt them. Doesn't matter how fucking hard you punch. This is a stupid fucking idea. Look, even if Gilgamesh was multiversal plus infinite multiverse, whatever, and he's fighting 15 dudes, and all those dudes range from fucking planetary to galaxy to universal or whatever, they can fucking wear him down and hurt him. Just like if I'm fighting a guy half my size, I'll whoop his ass. If I'm fighting 30 dudes half my size, I'm probably not gonna do very well. This shit really is common sense. I don't know why people think that you just can't affect people in any way unless you hit this a certain amount. This is the type of logic that leads to people saying crazy shit like Cloud's sword swings are the same strength as a fucking solar system exploding. Because since Cloud survived Sephiroth's supernova ability and is still able to be damaged by Sephiroth's sword swings, that means that Sephiroth's sword swings are solar system ability, which means Cloud's sword swings must be, since they match blades all the time. No! Supernova is his strongest fucking ability. It's not just his strongest ability, it's the strongest ability in the game, period. It's a move that he can only use if he turns into this godlike being and only once in a while. He can't just spam the bitch. He's not even capable of actually doing that much damage. He has to teleport people into another world where there's a fucking sun exploding next to him. If he was capable of doing that amount of damage with a sword, there'd be no reason to even have the ability or use it. Again, just because Cloud survived a supernova exploding does not mean that every attack has to be at least that level just to damage him in any way. Look, if you stab me with a fucking sword, it goes through me, and you pull it out, and I'm alive, and I'm still fighting. I'm alive, I'm hurt, but I'm fighting. Does that mean you can't hurt me with a toothpick? I'm like immune to damage lower than that? No! This is a stupid fucking point. Stop arguing and debating like this. It doesn't make any logical sense. No, supernova is not the baseline power of every character in the series just because some people survived it. That is the maximum, most powerful thing we've seen in Final Fantasy VII. I'm not gonna say that no Final Fantasy character gets up to multiversal because I haven't played all the Final Fantasies, but no one in Final Fantasy VII gets up to multiversal. Y'all are full of shit. Stop it. So now with my rant's over, the question becomes, what version of Cloud are we actually using? Because there's a couple of versions here. And I'm using every version that seems canon to me. I mean, Final Fantasy VII, Advent Children, and Dirge of Cerberus all are in the same timeline, and they're all sequels to each other and shit. That's one thing. The remake is actually not a remake, but it's actually a separate timeline where certain characters are living through these events again, like Sephiroth and Aerith, and Cloud is re-experiencing events for the first time. So, I'm going to be using the version of Cloud that was in the original games where he's more powerful and more experienced and all of that, because in the current Final Fantasy games, the remake, he's still kind of green. But the events that happen in the remake are canon, and I could use them comparatively to just better show how powerful a character could be, since, you know, graphics are better and all that different kind of stuff. But basically, the Cloud in the remake is the Cloud from the original, just at an earlier point in the timeline, reliving through the same events. But don't worry, I am using the more powerful original Cloud version. So how strong is this motherfucker? Honestly, I think Solar System's probably about right. If you just look at all the lore across the games, that seems like the best place to fit him at. So the best way to actually measure his power is to look at his summons, because it's a part of the lore that in order for a character to summon a particular creature, they need to be worthy of mastering it. Essentially, they have to beat it in a fight. They have to be more powerful than the thing that they're summoning. Otherwise, if you summon it, it will go crazy and go on a rampage. The summons only listen to people who are more powerful than they are. So Cloud would scale and go above every single summon he has. This would include characters like Ifrit, who's capable of turning the entire planet to ash. Now, to destroy a planet is planetary. To turn it to ash to the point that it's literally just dust, that's like a large planet. That would require a massive amount of force, more so than just blowing it up. But Ifrit is not the strongest summon. Minerva is considered to be the strongest summon, and Minerva was beaten by Zac Flair, not Cloud. Cloud way surpasses Zac Flair, since Zac Flair isn't even capable of taking on Sephiroth with the help of other soldiers of his same class. Like, Sephiroth just easily takes on multiple Zac Flairs at the same time without any issues. So the fact that he was able to beat Minerva, and Minerva is more powerful than Ifrit, that tells me Cloud is significantly more powerful than Minerva. Like, significantly more powerful than Minerva. And really, it all comes back down to Supernova. The most powerful person Cloud has ever fought that we can measure his strength against is Sephiroth. What is Sephiroth's strongest attack? Supernova. He blows up a fucking sun, destroys multiple planets and an entire solar system. Cloud takes the hit and it doesn't fucking kill him. It nearly kills him. The ability is specifically designed in the game to take 15/16 of a person's health. So it damn near kills him, which tells me that Cloud is solar system level, but not much over. Like, really just at the very peak of solar system. But again, everyone, he's still capable of being harmed by lesser attacks. Just because the character's solar system does not mean that nothing less than solar system will harm him. It's bullshit. Every single sword swing that Sephiroth does is not a solar system busting sword swing. So chill your fucking brakes. And now here comes the fun part where we have to talk about all of Cloud's powers, because he has so many. He has so many powers. Okay, every element in existence, light and darkness. Healing, a resistance to fate manipulation. It's a really big part in the remake series that they're not bound by fate, and they are free to make their own decisions, regardless of what fate has in store for them. Paralysis inducement, death manipulation, time manipulation, transmogrification, regeneration negation, immortality negation, silence, which basically takes away a person's ability to use any form of magic, mind manipulation, teleportation, dimensional banishment. I can go on. Cloud has a lot of fucking powers, as well as basically resisting all of the things that he can do. He is an absurdly powerful character that has a ton of variety in what he can do. Now on to his opponent in the red corner, Feld. And fuck. Okay, give me a second. So, Dart was a perfectly normal child living a very normal life in a very normal village. And then all of a sudden, this asshole called the Black Monster showed up and destroyed his village and killed everyone that he knew and loved. But from that point on, Dart swore revenge on the Black Monster. They would hunt it down and kill it. So, he moved to a nearby village, got a sword master as a very young child, and trained up until he was like 17, 18 for the sole purpose of hunting down and killing the Black Monster. When he was around 17 or 18, he left his village and went searching, getting into all kinds of different adventures and all kinds of crazy shit before eventually returning back home, having not been able to find the Black Monster, but now being a very skilled swordsman and adventurer. But this motherfucker cannot get a break. When he got back home, guess what? His new village was also sacked by someone totally different than the Black Monster. Everything was burnt to the fucking ground. After that, Dart's childhood friend and eventual fuck buddy Shawnee gets kidnapped by some local bad guys, and that spins off and starts this whole long story about a moon child and a giant Cthulhu space monster and a magic tree that drops fruit, and every time a fruit drops, it brings a new species into the world. And it's Legend of Dragoon is a very complicated story, guys. You have no idea how long this video would have to be in order for me to properly explain the plot of this game. So what exactly can Dart do? Well, he can do a lot. He's actually powerful as shit. Despite Dart's age, throughout his travel, he becomes a unbelievably skilled swordsman, to the point that he eventually defeats the greatest swordsman in the world. And that's like 2/3 of the way through the game. He eventually fights the giant Cthulhu monster I talked about earlier. That motherfucker just like throws a galaxy at him. Like literally. That's not a figure of speech. He grabs a galaxy and chucks it at Dart. And Dart's just like, that's cool. We can just keep fighting now. Like he's barely even bothered by it. He fights Melbu Frama, this incredibly powerful being who wants to basically end all of existence. And the only way to kill him is to kill him throughout all of time at the same time. And Dart does it. They fight across all of time at the same time. From the creation of the universe all the way to like the post-apocalypse and into the destruction of the universe. He can do all this crazy stuff because he becomes the red-eyed dragoon. So in Legend of the Dragoon, dragons are not like normal dragons. They're like these insane, godlike alien beings almost. And a dragoon is a human who takes a dragon's soul and essentially incorporates it into his own. And the soul of a dragon gives him all kinds of crazy powers. These crazy powers are as simple as things like producing fire, although his fire is significantly more potent than normal. Like his fire is so hot and damaging, it can kill beings who are made of fire. You could explain that one to me. But in general, it just makes him really fucking powerful. He can fly, he has all kinds of crazy fire powers, he has extremely high defense, and acquires a massive resistance to pretty much all types of magic that exists within Legend of the Dragoon, and just generally becomes a goddamn Dragon Ball Z character. And if that wasn't enough, eventually he gets the soul of the Divine Dragon, which is the most powerful dragon that ever lived, which gives him the ability to use divine magic. And I know divine magic sounds like holy magic. It's not. It's basically just like a super magic that cannot be blocked, defended against, or resisted in any way. It essentially negates all durability whatsoever and just does massive damage to anybody you do it to. It is the ultimate super ridiculously overpowered magic in the game Legend of the Dragoon, and Dart gets complete and 100% mastery over it. Dart is fucking broken. I didn't even get to his items yet. They give him all kinds of crazy abilities and resistances. He can basically resist every single form of status effect that exists. Well, in that universe anyway. Petrification, mind manipulation, poison, any kind of elemental effects, really any kind of magic at all. So yeah, Dart is basically half human, half dragon space god, and can casually blow up galaxies and tank pretty much everything. So let's see who wins the fight. Yeah, as much as I would like to have a long drawn out conversation and really compare both of these characters' powers, skills, skills and abilities to one another, because I do think it would be an interesting fight. Like how Cloud's whole fighting style is basically the exact opposite of Dart's. How Dart is this big tanky character with really high defenses, and Cloud is a super speedy offensive character who hits really, really hard. There's just no getting around that Dart is considerably more powerful than Cloud. I mean, absolute maximum damage he takes throughout the whole game is the sun exploding and destroying a whole solar system. That's maximum. Dart tanks having a galaxy thrown at him in the mid-game. He fights several more beings that are stronger than that as the story goes on. This is a casual feat for him. I mean, you're talking about Dart being billions, if not trillions of times more powerful than Cloud. That's not even mentioning the divine dragon magic, which negates all magical resistances, which means even if they did have the same level of power, Cloud still wouldn't have a way of defending against Dart's attacks. As much as my child self would have really enjoyed this fight back in the 90s, I gotta admit, it's a complete fucking wash here. Dart absolutely wrecks Cloud's shit. Next up, we have Luke Skywalker from Star Wars versus Paul Atreides from Dune. And yes, before you ask, absolutely Star Wars is a ripoff of Dune. Everything from its visual language to what the planets look like to actual straight up whole creatures are ripped directly from Dune and put into Star Wars. The only really unique concept that Star Wars has outside of Dune is the whole Jedi Sith Force thing. But even that kind of goes under the same umbrella of religious sci-fi space wizards that the Bene Gesserit from Dune go under. So Star Wars is basically Dune written for children. It takes the Dune world and then pushes a hero's journey type story into it that is about a young, hopeful, good, but sadly generic person, and puts him through this story where he has to overcome some great evil empire to save the world, get the girl who just so happens to be his sister, and become a hero that he was always meant to be, with a small bit of a Jesus allegory in there due to him being a chosen one and his daddy not having a real dad. And as for Luke, he can do all kinds of crazy shit from, well, I mean, he's got the Force. Do I have to list off all the shit that the Force can do? He's got telekinesis that allows him to see into the future. He gets visions and shit. He can control people's minds. It's a universal space juju that allows people to do all kinds of crazy shit. I don't know what you're doing here if you haven't seen Star Wars. Over the course of the films, and even more so in the extended universe, Luke slowly becomes basically the greatest lightsaber Force user that has ever existed ever in the entire universe. This compares to people like Darth Bane and Darth Revan and Palpatine and Darth Nihilus and all these other crazy characters. Apparently Luke is just the greatest of them all, which allows us to compare him to some pretty goddamn impressive feats, although those feats are not as great as people like to say they are. Before anyone even says it, let me cover it right now. No, Luke Skywalker is not a planetary solar system galaxy level being. I know a lot of people who read the books think this. No, he's not. Every single time someone has come up to me and said this, there has always been an explanation to explain how that shit is possible outside of them just having that amount of Force power. At absolute maximum, the top tier Force users in the Star Wars universe, even in the extended universe, can like bring down a large ship or a really big building. People like to calculate this shit in the stupidest ways ever. Nihilus is able to suck the energy out of a planet and destroy. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, he's sucking the energy. He's not blowing it up by force. Palpatine created a Force storm that covered an entire okay, yeah, he created a Force storm. Like Storm and Marvel can create a storm across a whole planet. That doesn't mean she could pack all of that energy into a physical punch. That's area of effect. But you don't understand. The thought bomb was able to affect an entire planet, and then Darth Cognis said that Darth Bane was the strongest thing she had ever felt, even though she had just felt the thought bomb go. I don't care. There's no evidence whatsoever that Bane is capable of that type of power without the thought bomb. If that was the case, why the fuck did he spend half the story getting the goddamn thought bomb and setting it off if he could do it himself? This is more scaling bullshit. Ignoring massive aspects of the story to force shit that doesn't fit. They're not planetary. They're not even close to planetary. And I get what you're thinking. Hey, Rouga, the fuck are you talking about? Why is this even a matchup? I've seen the Dune movies. How the hell is he going to stand up to Luke Skywalker? Well, let me tell you something, son. If you have seen the Dune movies, you don't know shit about Dune, because that's nothing. They don't even tell you what a mentad is in the fucking movies. So let me give you an actual legitimate rundown of who Paul Atreides is, because them movies didn't quite do it. Paul Atreides starts off the story as the son of a man by the name of Leto Atreides, who is the Duke of planet Caladan, basically the king of that planet. I don't know why he's called a duke, it's just the word they use. He's basically ruler over this entire planet under the emperor who rules over the entire solar system. So I guess that's why they call him a duke. Makes sense, actually. Eventually, the emperor gifts Leto a new planet to rule over, a planet known as Arrakis, which is just this absolute fucking hellhole. It's a giant desert planet, much like Tatooine. Nobody wants to go there. It sucks. And giving him power over this planet was just the first step in a 25-step plan in order to take down all of House Atreides and, like, kill them because they were getting way too powerful and the Emperor was afraid that they were going to rise up and take over and all this kind of shit. This happens, Leto dies, and then Paul is basically abandoned on Arrakis with nowhere to go and then just starts to go off and join the desert people. But Paul was no normal 15-year-old kid. For one, he was trained from birth to be the perfect ruler. He was trained in swordsmanship by the universe's greatest swordsman. He was trained in military tactics by a great general. He was trained in pretty much anything you can possibly think of by the greatest the galaxy has in all of those things. On top of that, he was born as a mentat, which is essentially a human supercomputer. Paul has the ability to calculate pretty much any information that's given to him damn near instantly. And none of this even talks about this crazy prophecy that he's a part of, where basically he's like the chosen one that will eventually become this really long word that I'm forgetting the name of. But basically, he gets the ability to look through all the timelines in the past, present, and future and basically becomes omniscient. He knows everything at all times. It is true, complete omniscience. By using all these crazy abilities, he was able to essentially take over the Fremen, who were the sand people that lived on Arrakis, and then rise up, defeat the Harkonnens, and then eventually go on and to defeat the Emperor, overthrowing him and becoming the new Emperor. So what you end up having by the end of the series is the universe's greatest warrior, as well as the universe's greatest strategist and thinker, most intelligent person who knows everything at all times and can react to it appropriately. And I haven't actually talked about the shields yet. He has this bullshit fucking shield ability. So in Dune, all the characters have special shields, but the shields don't work by repelling force. They work by not allowing anything above a certain speed to pass through them. Force is completely irrelevant to these shields. It doesn't matter if you're a planet buster, a city buster, whatever. It doesn't matter. If you hit this shield, you can't put any force to the other side of it. It completely negates any form of force. The only way you could pass through it is if you go very, very slowly. It only allows things to go through it that are going slower than 9 centimeters per second. Just to give you an idea of how slow that is, that's 0.2 miles per hour. This means that in the Dune series, every single fight that happens between two fighters has nothing to do with speed or strength. It's all about outsmarting your opponent and essentially tricking them into getting the blade on the other side of their shield to stab them and actually cause damage, because there isn't a character in this series that cannot react to a knife that's going that slow. There are several characters in this series who are stated to be so fast the eye can't register their movements and can react to laser fire weapons very casually. But all of that speed means absolutely nothing in terms of these shields. Essentially, it doesn't matter how much faster you are than Paul. If you start fighting him, you have to be smarter than him in order to get past his shield and stab him. And this is where Luke Skywalker is going to have a problem. Luke Skywalker will have no issues with overpowering Paul Atreides or blitzing him, because he should be faster and stronger. The problem is that because of the shield, his strength and speed aren't going to matter. And because Paul Atreides can see into the future in all timelines, any action he tries to take to get around this, to get around the shield and to get around Paul's just generally superior fighting style when it comes to this type of fighting, it's not going to matter either, because he's going to see it coming before Luke ever even thinks of doing it. So the question then becomes, who wins this fight? Does Luke Skywalker overcome Paul Atreides' omniscience and basically ability to completely negate all of his stats? Or are Paul's defenses just too strong for him to deal with? And to be perfectly honest with you, I don't really see how Luke can get around this. There really isn't any evidence that Luke's force abilities will be able to affect Paul on the inside of the shield and basically bypassing having to go through it. He's never done it before. He didn't do it to Darth Vader or any other person while he was fighting that probably would have been helpful to him when trying to get past their armor. In fact, very few, if any, force users ever use this. If that was the case, why would it even matter for any force user to wear armor in the first place? Things like the obelisk armor that are specifically designed to repel lightsabers wouldn't matter against lightsaber users if you can just like force crush their heart. I always hear this type of argument, but I've never actually seen it happen in the series, so it's just like people writing fan fiction saying, well, I guess they can, maybe. If it hasn't happened yet, you can't claim that it will. Then you have things like Luke's mind control abilities, which again, people like to jump to a lot, but I don't really see why. I mean, it's stated very clearly multiple times that the mind control abilities of Jedi and Sith only work on the weak-minded, which Paul is absolutely not. And and I've never once seen any Force user in all of Star Wars use it during a fight anyway. On the flip side, Paul Atreides actually has control of the voice, and the voice works on everybody. Your willpower actually isn't relevant. Basically, Paul Atreides gives you an order, and then you black out, and you have to do whatever it is he says. And he can do this to basically anyone, including other extremely powerful people who have the voice, and the only real defense for it is to not be able to hear the command. Willpower isn't relevant, and it's very possible that Paul Atreides would be able to use this on Luke Skywalker. Look, I know this section is sounding like I'm shitting on Luke Skywalker a lot, but it's almost like this character is specifically designed to beat Luke Skywalker. I mean, he has something for basically everything that Luke has. The way Dune's universe is structured forces characters to fight in a very specific way. And if Luke has never fought in this very specific way and has no real way to compete against someone like Paul Atreides, who was taught from birth to fight in this particular way, I just don't see how he can overcome it. Yeah, so as much as this is going to annoy the Star Wars fans, I have to go with Paul here. He doesn't have nearly as much stuff as Luke does, but the stuff he does have, he doesn't have half of the powers and abilities that Luke has, but the ones he does have are far more potent and more useful. Last up, but certainly not least, we have Ratchet and Clank versus Jak and Daxter. I'm not saying the titles, it's obvious. So just to be clear, I don't think that these are ripoffs of each other. Let me just say that right out the gate. But this is actually one of the cooler stories in gaming, and I wanted to talk about it. So here it is. Basically, when the original Jak and Daxter and Ratchet and Clank were being made, Insomniac, the company behind Ratchet and Clank, and Naughty Dog, the company behind Jak and Daxter, shared the same building in California when they were making the games. During their lunch breaks, they would literally eat in the exact same cafeteria as each other. This meant that a lot of their developers would constantly talk to each other throughout the day and during their lunch breaks and sort of share ideas and bad ideas back and forth for each of their games. Both games inspired each other throughout the entire process of development, and this is why both games share so many similarities. They're both science fiction platformers that take place on an alien world where you're a hero who has like a little buddy that crawls on your back. There's clear similarities between these games. There's a reason why people like to compare them so often. And to be honest, it's kind of one of the coolest like friendship stories that happened in the gaming industry. So obviously the next thing to do is to corrupt the fuck out of it and make them fight to the death, obviously. And if these two did fight to the death, who would win? So what's Jak and Daxter's whole deal? Oh shit. Okay, so I can't give you a quick explanation of Jak and Daxter's origin because all three games are so closely linked into his origin and like one complete story, you know? Like if I just described to you what happened in the beginning of Jak and Daxter 1, that's not enough information. I'd have to go through the story of all three games. It's just kind of the way the games work. They're all linked to each other and they're all a part of his origin. It's a whole thing. It's very difficult to talk about this character without having to go into massive detail about everything from the fucking precursors and it's a lot. It's a whole thing. Just know that Jak is an alien adventurer mute guy who eventually is no longer a mute, and his story involves everything from ancient aliens to a time travel plot to all kinds of other crazy shit. He's a badass dude with a gun who likes to drive around, shoot people, and he turns into a dark version and increases his power, and he punches people with like crazy dark eco that kind of looks like blue electricity, but it's not. Trust me, it's like a dark eco shit. And then he's got light eco that allows him to control time, and that's it. That's it. That's his whole thing. As far as the PS2 platforming mascots go, he was the edgelord one. Other than the first one, the Jak games were the games you wanted to play if you really wanted to play Grand Theft Auto, but your parents wouldn't let you. Then you would play Jak 2 and 3, and it was a pretty good substitute. On the other side, we got Ratchet and Clank, which originally was super simple, and I could have explained it to you in like a couple minutes, but obviously they had to convolute that shit up too with fucking dimensional travel and the ancient Lombax race of weird, and like Clank's a time travel god now. Is okay, well, whatever. All you really need to know about Ratchet is that he is a super genius, gun-toting hick, essentially, that's like going through space, killing a bunch of people with a very massive arsenal of crazy-ass weapons, and he saves like the galaxy time and time again, like so many times. Every game he saves the galaxy, like 3 or 4 different galaxies. And these guns give him all manner of crazy powers. I mean, he could stop time, he could shoot antimatter, he could create black holes, he can rip holes in reality, he could shrink people, he could turn people into sheep, he could turn people into snowmen if he doesn't want to turn people into sheep. He can control gravity, he could shoot out this disco ball and force people to dance to it. It's like a really weird specific form of mind control for some reason. And over the course of like, I don't know, 15 games, he's had such a large variety of weapons with so many different fucking abilities that is there even any point in me really comparing these two? Like, Ratchet's gonna win. I like Jak, I like him as a character, I like his games, I like Daxter, like I enjoy the world of Jak and Daxter, and it's a bummer that they haven't made one in so long. But the truth of the matter is that he just doesn't have that much going on for him. He's good at punching people and climbing on things, and he has a couple of cool guns, and then he's got the time abilities with the light jack and the punching lightning thing, dark shit with dark jack, and that's it. That's all he has. That's everything he has across all 3 games. Ratchet, by comparison, has more than that in his first initial appearance. If you take his entire series into account, it's not even close. I haven't even counted his most powerful weapons. Like, he's got this, incinerator, eviscerator, I forgot what it's called. It just has like a massive light, and then after the light goes away, everything's ash now. It just turns every living creature in the room except for you into ash. He has multiple versions of the Rhino, in which the first Rhino in the first game was considered the strongest weapon in the entire universe that shot like hundreds of rockets every second, and each one has gotten more and more powerful. One of them like created a mini sun that just torched everything in the area, and then there was like one that opened up holes in space-time and just dropped random shit on top of people. They're just ridiculously overpowered. And then you have all the crazy powers that Ratchet has that has nothing to do with his guns, like the fact that he can phase through shit, and his wrenches can phase through shit. He can turn invisible. He can heal himself with nanobots. He has gravity boots that allow him to walk on walls and shit. Sometimes Clank can turn into a giant fucking mech that's taller than skyscrapers. How the hell's Jack gonna deal with that? Look, guys, I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm definitely rushing this last section because I gotta go take a massive shit. But that doesn't change the fact that this is still a very one-sided fight. Ratchet and Clank win, and it's not even close. But that's gonna be all for me. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, share, and join the membership. Remember, if you join the membership, you get videos early. And as a one-time only gift just for today, if you join the membership, we'll give you like a weird sex robot. Yeah, we'll send it right to your house, right in front of your parents and neighbors, and they'll know what kind of sick pervert you are. And always remember, y'all stay safe out there, you hear?